Hello and welcome to Premier Pro Wrestling Presents Jewish, Asian, and Pacific Island wrestlers you should know in commemoration all month of May, for those heritage months. Today we're going to talk about somebody who I consider a friend, even though I haven't talked to him in 100 years. Cary Silkin, the former owner of Ring of Honor. He's not just the former owner of Ring of Honor. Even when Rob Feinstein owned the company, Cary was always involved with Ring of Honor from its inception. He's not just a proprietor or a financier, but he's pretty much the heart and soul of Ring of Honor. Cary Silkin is a man who loves professional wrestling and has loved professional wrestling since the 60s. He's always been around wrestling, but he's always found a way to justify his being around pro wrestling. There was a time, and I wish I could find him, but I can't find him anywhere, where Cary actually took pictures and produced a wrestling magazine in Puerto Rico because he had a place down there and he was involved with World Wrestling Council and IWA, and again, he financed himself out of pocket. You know, today the internet wrestling community is so opinionated, blah, 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 blah. Cary Silkin was somebody who put his money where his mouth was. Unbelievable how much heart, soul, sweat, equity, and money he put into Ring of Honor. And as we all know, Ring of Honor once was such a contender, to be that alternative wrestling company that, the whole world was really clamoring for. You can't do anything but respect the man. You can't call Cary Silkin a money mark. And anybody that has worked with Cary Silkin ends up being connected to Cary Silkin because that's how he conducts his business. To be honest with you, I'm kind of jealous of that because he puts an emotional investment into everybody that he works with, everybody that worked for him, and he balances it out pretty good. You know what I'm saying? If anything, Cary Silkin lost money being loyal to people. The way that he led Ring of Honor, he was not hands-on. He was not playing live wrestling action buddies like Tony Khan with human beings. He knew that he was onto something, and he trusted people. He gave them that chance and trust people. Sometimes those people that he was loyal to just didn't deliver, or sometimes those people that he was loyal to just weren't cut out for the position. Now, at its peak, and I'm not talking about its drawing peak, because early on when it was new, when they would run certain towns like Boston, for example, they would get bigger crowds than they got when Ring of Honor was considered at its peak. CM Punk was on top with a couple of other guys like Samoa Joe, Homicide was there, Dan Maff, and others, But the issue was the DVDs, He had people in charge of Ring of Honor that he could trust with certain things, but I don't think Cary could actually handle that growth with the small crew that he had that he could trust, and they had too many people trying to wear too many hats. And because of the Rob Feinstein scandal, for those of you that don't know, the official owner, Rob Feinstein, RF Video, was a real scumbag, and he got caught up in a sting trying to go watch wrestling with a 14-year-old boy he was playing butt games with online. Don't know why he wasn't charged. Maybe we'll cover him some point here, but I don't like to be too negative with these things. But Cary trusted his guys. He trusted Ross Foreman. He trusted Gabe Sapolsky, and he trusted, Mr. Ike, Sid Ike. And they were doing a hell of a job, but they were just too overbooked, if you understand what I'm saying. I did do some work with Ring of Honor 07, 08. I don't know when it started, maybe even 06, 04. One of the greatest ideas I had, and I think it was perfect timing for it, must have been about 2008. I was friends with Cary, and I'd done some business with Cary. Cary knew that I was good at what I did, which is basically all facets of pro wrestling. I was down in Puerto Rico, and I was actually part owner or partners with IWA Puerto Rico after Victor Quinones had passed, the original, and owner of IWA Puerto Rico. We had one of our top guys, El Mesias, Ricky Banderas, today's El Muertas, was the top heel at AAA. We had Bison Smith, who lived on the island and worked with IWA Puerto Rico, who was a big star in Noah, Japan. We had a small talent roster at the time because, that's how it goes in wrestling. We had 4 hours of television, 2 hours on Saturday, 2 hours on Sunday. Our production was lacking because of the fact that Victor Quinones had died and there wasn't any influx of money coming in to get new equipment, etc. But the fact that we had 4 hours of television and really only 2 hours of talent and resources to produce it with, I wanted to put together a project called Pro Wrestling Worldwide, which was going to be a combination of IWA Puerto Rico, AAA, NOAH, and also Ring of Honor. And I think we would have really set the world on fire after we'd set the island on fire with that product. And it would have been phenomenal because you would have been able to produce a television that you could actually set up your own, your own fly-ins and i.e. shoot invasion angles. I talked to Dorian Roldan at AAA. Bison had talked to Noah Japan. Savio and Miguel, who are running things at IWA Puerto Rico, were more than, jacked about doing it, as was Cary. It's just so many different personalities, and, until this moment, I haven't been able to admit it, but I was getting divorced, and I didn't even know it while I was in Puerto Rico, and that's the real reason why that never came into fruition. But the other thing is, what happened there is the fan base kind of effed up Ring of Honor. You see, tape trading pretty much killed Ring of Honor because the way that they were doing their DVDs, which were very popular and great sellers, people were able to pirate, people were able to tape trade, people were able to rip videos. And that's what ended up killing them, is at the end of the day, even though they sold all those videos, the cost to produce versus what they actually sold was a break even, which was very sad because at one point, and CM Punk said it, I think when he was on top with World Wrestling Entertainment, that if they could have got a cut, him and several other guys could have got a cut of the video sales, which they thought were, more lucrative than they actually were, he would have stayed with Ring of Honor because that's the happiest he'd been in pro wrestling. I also know that there was not any real interest, but there was an idea, and there was a text message from Punk to Cary about buying Ring of Honor, but that's just where it ended at the end of the day because the brand became less important than the individuals. Cary's intentions were to have a real wrestling company, but the trust issues after, they gotten that child molester crap from Rob Feinstein tied to their company really effed them up. But at the end of the day, Cary Silkin is a stand-up guy. Cary Silkin is a guy who puts his money where his mouth is, and if you're in his inner circle and he can trust you, the sky's the limit. He's actually a really great man. The other guy we're going to talk about is Asian superstar Masa Saito, or Mr. Saito. It's funny to me how today people don't know who Saito is, who Saito actually was. He passed away at 76 in 2018. But they do know about the story where two wrestlers, Saito and Patera, actually ended up doing jail time for an incident that happened at a McDonald's in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Sadly about that part is, at the end of the day, Saito didn't really have much to do with it. The police knocked on his door by accident, and they started getting rough with him. Well, where he comes from in Japan, you get rough back, And I'll tell you, Masa Saito is someone you don't want to get rough with. I would say the best street fight, MMA, wrestling match, boxing match, mixed martial arts match would be Masa Saito versus Tonga Fafita, or Ming or Haku, you might know him as, because they're about the same size, and they're probably about the same toughness too. I think that Saito probably really watched his actions and his temper, because I don't know if he ever became a citizen, but he was probably worried about being a foreigner in this country. But when that happened, from what I understand, he was provoked, and if there was video footage of it, I don't think Saito would have ended up doing jail time in the first place, the way I hear it. Now, that being said, it was an honor for me to actually wrestle with Masa Saito, but it's also one of the scariest moments of my life. I was a young wrestler, and I was doing extra work for Vern Gagne's AWA, the American Wrestling Association, and the television that they had is in the local markets, especially up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. But at the time, they were the first syndicated show, which was on at 3 p.m. every day on ESPN. Well, I got up there to do some extra work, and I saw that Saito was there, and this was his first match out of prison. He did 3 years. I don't know why, but I think he got sentenced to a little bit more time than Ken Patera, who was also involved with that arrest in Waukesha, that incident. But Saito had come back over from Japan as Vern was reaching out to try anything to keep things afloat. Saito was there with the 7'5" guy who was actually at the time, and I can't find his name for the life of me, the current Akebono at the time. He was a legitimate sumo champion. This man was 7'5" and almost 400 pounds, and Saito had to be 280 pounds and just thick as a wall. So my partner and I were supposed to tag against them. This wasn't going to be taped, because what they were doing at the time with the sumo guy is, after he had trained in Japan at the dojo, they were making a big deal out of taking an Akebono champion and actually transitioning him over to professional wrestling to try to help keep afloat the struggling Japanese company at the time. He was only supposed to go to the AWA taping with Saito as just part of his experience. But one way, shape, or form, someone talked the young man into getting into the ring and tagging. Well, my partner had earlier in the night worked Akio Sato, and it didn't happen. I know it was total bullshit, but he claimed he got kicked in the balls by accident by Sato, who I don't know anybody Sato's ever hurt, so whatever. So he was just going to play apron boy. Well, I was with this 400-pound Akebono who couldn't speak any English. Saito, whose English was not that good, and he hadn't been in a ring in 3 years because this is his first match out of prison. So I'm a young kid going, okay, if this is what it's all about, welcome to the pro wrestling industry. I guess I'll be just fine as long as that big guy, the sumo guy, doesn't back me into the ropes. Well, first thing that happens is the big guy backs me into the ropes when Saito tagged them in. But anyway, long story short, we worked it out. I came out of that thing not only not hurt, but basically unscathed. But after the match, Saito just rushed me, man. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a dead man. What did I do wrong? Picked me up, swung me like a child. I had no choice, and thanked me and actually kissed me on the cheek because I'd done something that lit him up like a Roman candle. At the time, though, I didn't realize how that could have politicked that into something as a young boy for down the road going to work in Japan, because I didn't know the kind of juice that Saito had with All Japan, New Japan, and any wrestling in Japan. But anyway, at the end of the day, that was a narrow escape. God looked out for me, and they don't get any tougher than Masa Saito. Like I said, I don't hear a lot about it. He's the generation before Meng Haku Tonga Fafita, but I would guarantee you that would be a fight for the ages, because I wouldn't be surprised if Masa Saito is just as tough, as Meng, who's probably the toughest wrestler, to date. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed these things. I'm going to go ahead and put their Wikipedia links. And you know what's fucked up? Cary Silkin doesn't have a Wikipedia link now that I think about it. So you guys go ahead, because I don't want to go through all of it, and find Cary on Twitter and on Instagram. He's still very active there, and he's still around wrestling. He's just not losing millions of dollars in it anymore, but he will always love wrestling. And once again, I got nothing but good shit to say about Cary Silkin, So that's it, man. In the description, I'm going to put Saito's Wikipedia link, and there you can also find out how to support Premier Pro Wrestling. And please be cool. There's no commercials on here. At least like and subscribe.